Scarlet and Violet added a new kind of Pokemon called Paradox Pokemon. Half were from the distant future, and half were from the distant past. And almost immediately, basically everyone agreed that the past Paradoxes were better designed, because the future ones looked very samey. Like, wow, a robot Delibird, a robot Volcarona. Oh, I can't wait to see what they do with Donphan. Oh my god, it's a robot. But I am here to reject that notion. These Robo-Boys are actually nothing alike, and I can prove it. See, while the past Paradox Pokemon have paleontological roots, the future Paradox Pokemon have just as many roots, but in science fiction. And as someone who was raised on a lethal amount of sci-fi, I think it's time I give these Pokemon the love they deserve. So by the nature of interpretation, most of what I'm saying will range from inspirations that I'm certain are accurate to made-up bullshit that even I don't really believe. So, in order to have an entertaining video while not spreading misinformation, I give you the bullshitometer. This meter will dynamically adjust to the level of bullshit I believe any given statement to contain. For example, I was conceived in this parking lot in New York. See, it didn't move. That's because this is an actual true fact that I know for some reason. Now let's try something else. I respect J.K. Rowling as an artist. Oh wow, that's going all the way. Okay, and you'll hear a ding, I guess, when it hits the top. Jesus. So keep an eye on that meter before you repeat any of this information to your friends to sound clever. Also, we'll be going in dex order, so let's start with Iron Treads. Iron Treads is a robot Donphan that can fold into itself like a Bakugan. It's also based on the concept of an alien war machine. In a lot of older sci-fi, like The Day the Earth Stood Still, it wasn't uncommon to think that humans wouldn't be the only species to invent robots. And because our robots tend to look like us, even if only in superficial ways, it begs the question, how would an alien do the same, and what would they even look like? It's also not uncommon for the line between alien and robot to get kind of blurry, either because robots just become that advanced, or maybe aliens just happen to look and function like robots. Who are we to say that life can't naturally form out of metal? Regardless, Iron Treads is an excellent representation of these concepts in a way many people don't get the chance to appreciate. Iron Bundle is a robot Delibird whose design is basically a joke. For starters, it physically resembles a wind-up toy, a Rock'em Sock'em robot, and some old horror movie designs for robot monsters, which are all very old ideas of what robots look like, which leads to its Pokédex entry, which states that it was created by an ancient civilization, which is the joke. The 1900s were ancient times. This is a pretty common trope, though, that there was once an ancient civilization that was so much more advanced than our own, and we just happen to be living in some sort of technological dark age. This could also be a non-jokey reason as to why Iron Bundle has such recognizable features, because it's not uncommon for that ancient civilization to be our own. Iron Hands and Iron Jugulus are a robot Hariyama and a robot Hydreigon, respectively, and they're cyborgs, which are fundamentally uninteresting to me. Starting with Iron Hands, it's a Theseusian cyborg. That's a Ship of Theseus paradox, the one where you replace all the parts and then is it the same thing at the end. Which some say is the most profound thing they've ever thought of, and I just don't care. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot to say about what it means to be human and where that line is drawn, but this kind of feels stupid when you think about cyborgs, because the only difference between cybernetic augmentations and disability aids appears to just be chrome paint. If you have a prosthetic leg, are you less human just because you have less organic body mass? I'm anorexic and have less body mass anyway. Am I 10% less human? See what I mean? The answer's no. Human appears to just be a binary that's either on or off. Either way though, Iron Hands is categorically not a human. You can catch it and use it in battle, but the Pokédex entry seems to imply that it may have been a human at some point. So wherever you want to draw your human-non-human line, Iron Hands crossed it at some point. Now, Iron Jugulus is actually a far more interesting take on a cyborg. It wasn't modified, it was actually born this way. The Pokédex states that it's the offspring of an organic Hydreigon and a robot, meaning that Iron Jugulus represents the very common trope of falling in love with a machine. But despite how common the trope is to the point that some people think that all sci-fi is about grinding them gears, it's rare to actually see offspring from this process because of, how sex works. So I assume Iron Jugulus is only this way because there was no easier way to represent this trope. I guess it was either this or a Tandemouth situation, which I'd rather not see. Thank you, get that off the screen. Iron Moth is a robot Volcarona and a UFO. But unlike Iron Treads, it was made by aliens for scientific purposes rather than warfare. Iron Moth represents both high-minded ideals of pacifism and scientific advancement, and the classic American idea of flying saucers and getting abducted for the purposes of sodomy. Which is why Iron Moth is specifically modeled after Volcarona, because it's American. But that's not it. See, Volcarona was once praised as a god by ancient humans, so if we apply that to Iron Moth, it's an ancient alien. You know, the idea that old creation myths were just misinterpretations or mistranslations of encounters with extraterrestrials. I've even seen people theorize that the Volcarona worshipped in legend was actually just an Iron Moth, which, while neat as an idea, is clearly not what they intended. But the UFO and ancient aliens connections on their own seem pretty solid to me. Iron Thorns is a robot Tyranitar from 1 billion years into the future, and that's it. The Pokédex literally gives us nothing else to work with, and neither does any of the extended media. But that's not nothing. There are plenty of stories about robots that are set so incomprehensibly far into the future that they start looking more like aliens than anything we could have made. And that's just it, isn't it? Humans didn't make these robots. They're made by other robots and may have even forgotten who or what humans ever were. Their purpose is beyond our understanding because they weren't made to be understood. And maybe that's why we know nothing about Iron Thorns. Iron Valiant is a robot combination of Gardevoir and Gallade, and it's more specifically an android. Now, I find androids incredibly interesting, so I have a lot more to say about this than the others, so let's start with what makes androids different from your traditional robot. The prefix ander means human, and the suffix oid means like. So an android is any machine that is human-like in its construction. This doesn't always have to be physical, by the way. In the movie Her, Samantha is just a disembodied voice, but the voice is undeniably a human's voice. Naturally, stories about androids will inevitably reflect what humans value and what we think makes us human, either by making the android seem less human for lacking one or more human traits, or more commonly, by having the android act more like a person than any of the actual humans. See every Asimov novel. The Pokédex says that Iron Valiant was created by a mad scientist supposedly as a weapon, an attempt at creating an evil AI, something sci-fi is certainly no stranger to, but the important part is that the scientist failed. Iron Valiant is a fairy fighting type, which is basically the Pokemon equivalent of lawful good. So while I see people claim that Iron Valiant is based on characters like Hal or Am, I disagree. To me, it seems more reminiscent of other androids, namely Pinocchio, Astro Boy, and basically every Mega Man character. Now, obviously, these three stories directly inspired one another, so of course the themes of each one will bleed into their successors, which I just think shows how strong of an emotion is conveyed by them. These stories are about parenting and fighting for what you love, valiantly, one might say. I adore these stories and have since I was a kid, and I think their influence on this Pokemon is unfairly overlooked. I think Iron Valiant is my favorite Pokemon, at least at this point in my life, and I hope now you can see why. Also, it's a combination of a feminine and masculine Pokemon, and it's genderless, so it's non-binary. I just think that detail's cute. Miraidon is a robot Cyclizar, and is the only future Paradox Pokemon that doesn't start with the word iron, although the Pokédex does mention that its name was once Iron Serpent, which is pretty cool. While the other future Paradox Pokemon seem to be based on larger story-related sci-fi concepts, Miraidon seems to just be a flying motorcycle, which is definitely a thing in fiction, but it's always been just a thing, not really plot relevant unless you're playing GTA Online. Miraidon also has wheels, which is unusual for an animal, but normal for a robot, so I guess it's just more prone to traffic accidents than the average lizard? Okay, let's be real for a second. The reason Miraidon doesn't fit in with the other Paradox Pokemon is because it's a box legendary. It wasn't designed as a Paradox Pokemon, it was designed as box art. And I don't like that. I think sacrificing themes for the sake of marketing makes the product worse, regardless of the reasons. And because of that, Iron Serpent here doesn't really feel like it belongs when it easily could have. This trio, which I'm going to call the Iron Justice Trio because I think it sounds cool, are robot versions of the Swords of Justice Trio. This one took me a while to crack. One implies that an evil team modified it, one was created as a weapon, and the last is good at getting rid of boulders and trees. There doesn't seem to be any sort of connection between those three things, so I figured I'd approach this from a different angle. See, the original Swords of Justice are based on the Three Musketeers, which is an incredibly famous French story, so are there any influential French sci-fi authors? Yeah, how about the guy that invented the genre? With this, I theorize that these three having such different details implies that they represent different Jules Verne novels. Iron Leaves represents Journey to the Center of the Earth, in which a group of explorers descend into the Earth and find a primitive jungle world full of ancient vegetation and hostile rock formations, which Iron Leaves was specifically built to deal with. Iron Crown represents From the Earth to the Moon, a story about a gun club that believes they can create a weapon powerful enough to send 3 men to the moon. Iron Crown was created as a weapon, and while I'm skeptical that a robotic sword horse could get you to the moon, maybe it's, like, really fast or something. Iron Boulder represents the mysterious island. In the novel, Captain Nemo, the guy from 20,000 Leagues, is revealed to have been a survivor of the Indian Rebellion of 1857 against British rule. Iron Boulder was modified by an evil organization, and if we count the modification as mental, and the East India Company definitely counts as evil, then I think this parallel works pretty well. Okay, yeah, they're probably not based on Jules Verne. Evil organizations, big weapons, and hostile plant life are such common tropes in sci-fi that I could have linked them to anything. Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel Comics, fucking Space Quest. I have zero idea how these three connect outside of just being sci-fi. Jules Verne was just the best I could do. But I challenge you to think of something better, because I genuinely can't. And as to why these three specifically also have past paradox forms, I have no idea. Maybe it's because the ideas of weapons, gods, and mounts are some of humanity's oldest concepts, except for the fact that riding animals is way more recent than the other two concepts, like by hundreds of thousands of years. Even if we simplify Miraidon to just the wheel, it doesn't work, because that's even more recent. So unless we somehow invented lizards 300,000 years ago, I have no idea. And that's all I have to say. I hope now you see why I like these Pokemon so much, and how annoying it is when people just write them off as lazy or uninspired. Although that seems to be how every Pokemon works, so I guess I shouldn't let it get to me. Thank you so very much for watching to the end, and I am so tired. This project has taken so much more out of me than I expected. I wanted this to just be a quick video between the two, and ended up putting way more effort into it than I expected. I feel like this didn't go well. Whatever, we'll see. That's for future me to figure out. I'm going to bed. Actually, there is just one more Future Paradox Pokemon I forgot to mention. Lyra